Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. Dr. Kelly Romorowski, Chief Strategy and Impact Officer here at the Jewish Federation, basically in charge of the money that goes out of the building, making sure that it's put to good use, that we identify the needs to address, and that we can report back to donors and the community alike on our investments. As we continue to stand in strong solidarity with Israel and uphold its right to defend diverse people of various faiths and backgrounds who live there, just like any democratic nation, we must also continue to support ongoing progress in building a more respectful, inclusive, and equitable world. That's why the Jewish Federation is very proud to support organizations that are making systemic change in Israel, specifically championing the issue of religious pluralism or religious freedom, such as Israel Hofsheet. I'm proud to introduce Uri Keidar, the Executive Director of Israel Hofsheet, the largest advocacy organization in Israel in the field of religious freedom and Jewish pluralism. Uri and his team work with members of the Knesset, ministers, and government officials to promote liberal policies in the field of religion and state, and also promote change through municipal politics and change-maker trainings. The organization also creates national campaigns that move the needle around public opinion on these ideas. It promotes bottom-up change as it conducts hundreds of Jewish weddings a year without the chief rabbinate's involvement, making it the most prominent organization in Israel to do so. Without the work of Israel Hofsheet in this area, many couples would not be able to actually get married and then to avail themselves of the rights of married couples in Israel and get those benefits. Before this role, Uri spent over 7 years leading positions in civil society organizations and politics, both in elected and professional positions. He grew up in Kibbutz Givat Brenner, where he now lives with his wife and 3 children. Uri earned his BA in political science and communications from Ben Gurion University of the Negev, where he served as the elected chairperson of the student union, and also holds a master's degree in public administration from Tel Aviv University. He completed his military service as a tank commander in the IDF's Armored Corps, where he still serves in active reserve duty. He's actually coming to us just a day after coming off of duty. Following the brutal events of October 7th and the onset of the war between Israel and Hamas, I would say now between Israel and Hamas and Hezbollah and right. Uri spent 3 months of active duty as a tank commander just now in the IDF. Following Uri's presentation, we'll have time for a brief question and answer. Please submit your questions if you're online through the chat, and we will try to remember to go to that. If you have any trouble technology-wise, we do have somebody monitoring the chat as well. You can put a message in there. And I also want to remind you that one of the reasons we have Uri here is because we fund Israel Hofsheet annually, basically. So it's part of our 3-year grant cycle that's finishing up this year. We funded Israel Hofsheet under religious pluralism, under Israel and overseas. And the organization of Federation also supports Israel Hofsheet through restricted gifts. So we're very happy to hear about both the work of Israel Hofsheet, Uri's personal experiences recently since October 7th, and why is religious pluralism and the work of Israel Hofsheet relevant today in the midst of war. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll try to sort of look forward direction.
I know, it's very confusing also because then you're just looking at a screen that has not much on it.
Yeah.
It's hard to make a connection.
Yeah, I'll try to do both. Let's see how it goes. So hi everyone, and thanks for having me here, and thanks for being here and being online. Although I think we're in the midst of very complicated times at home, and I'll try and sort of go over what happened with my organization and myself and my family in the recent months, and also sort of broaden the discussion around the things that we do and around the things that are happening at home. So I wanted to start by sharing this this WhatsApp correspondence. It's me and a friend corresponding on October 5th, coordinating a visit to Kfar Aza that was scheduled for October 7th. This friend lives there, and we shared a love for a basketball team. We have like a group of friends who have an annual meeting that's usually around eating, and it was supposed to be on October 7th in Kfar Aza. And when we all woke up on the morning of October 7th, our WhatsApp group sort of switched into a mode of sort of going back and forth with this friend and making sure how he is. He is fine. He was rescued at 1:30 a.m. on the following day, after almost 24 hours in which they were in the safe room. And he and his family are safe, but it was sort of a very intensive day, both with everything going on, but also like when just trying to understand how he is, what's going on, how is his family, and sort of also experiencing a lot of the things that sort of he was updating us about. And a lot of those things didn't make sense while we were sort of getting the information from him. And I guess that waking up here a few hours after we are waking up in Israel and sort of seeing the amount of things that have already happened when it was morning here was probably unbelievable. But this is how this all started for me and for my family. For Israel Hofsheet and our very close circle, we had a lot of people who unfortunately lost their loved ones. We have Noam Dan, who you see on the left in black. Noam is a wedding officiator for us, and now also one of the leading voices of the Free the Hostages movement. She lost both Carmela Dan and Noya Dan, who were at times considered missing at the beginning of all of this. Two of her family members did come back from Gaza, and one relative is still there. Yotam Kipnis is a graduate of one of our trainings. He lost both his parents. And Chaim Ben Yaakov, who you see on the right, the microphone in the pen and holding these papers while conducting a wedding, lost his son Yuval. And you see in the middle, you see Aviatar Miller wearing white, also holding the microphone, also a wedding officiator for us, lost his cousin Yuval Zilber. And these are all people who are very, very close to us, part of the organization itself. If I'll move forward a bit, then this is sort of how I looked in the last 3.5 months, mostly. And on the other picture, you see my family, you see Ayelet, my wife, you see Adam, our son, and this is Eitan, our smaller son, being held by a neighbor in one of the instances in which they ran to the shelter when I was away. We went a few hours after this all broke. In the first 2 hours, we were in the safe room of our neighbor. My apartment in the kibbutz doesn't have a safe room. And we were with our neighbors. A few hours later, we went to a kibbutz close by where my brother lives. They do have a safe room, and we went to spend the night over there. And the following morning, we went to my wife's family. They live in Sde Boker, which is very down south and very isolated. So usually that's our drill when things started to get problematic. We go to Sde Boker. On October 7th, we literally didn't feel safe to drive all the way. We weren't sure how things look like on that part of the country. And we did ended up going on the morning of October 8th. A few hours later, along with my friends, I took my stuff and went to the army. My unit spent the last 3.5 months both in the north and in Gaza. We are scheduled to be released probably during next week. Hopefully, it's still live. but it looks like it. And we're pretty sure that we will be called back within a matter of months. It's just how it is at these moments. And it's been a long journey. I think both family-wise, organizationally wise, and for pretty much every circle that I'm part of. Moving forward a bit, this also is a picture from October 7th. You see Ayelet, you see Adam, you see Imri, she's our older daughter. This is the safe room of our neighbors, who are amazing, and we're lucky to have them. During the last 3.5 months, one of their drills when there was an alarm is that they run to our house and pick up one of the kids. And we're also lucky because they're there, and we're lucky because she is an English teacher, has like a whiteboard, so the kids can draw on it, and they I think like being there more than they like being at home. And actually, before we move forward, I wanted to say thank you, mainly because throughout these 3.5 months, pretty much wherever I went, I saw people who flew from here. Some of them just came physically to Israel to do whatever. Many people volunteering really throughout everywhere I looked. And I know that there were a lot of people who were doing a lot of work here and investing their times and efforts and supporting Israel really in our darkest hour. It was felt wherever I went. It happened throughout, and specifically for the Federation, one of the things that happened once we got to the south, a few weeks after we went to the army, we got south and we understood that we need a place to put our stuff, and our stuff is a lot. It's a lot of stuff, like dozens of people who have a lot of equipment, too much equipment, but that's a different story. And the first thing I did when we understood that we need a warehouse is that I called Tali, and in a matter of minutes, she just instructed me to go to Netivot to meet the people there. They were waiting for us. We got really all the help we could get. And I'm saying that both to say thank you and to make sure that you know the Israel team is amazing. And also because I think that those are the instances in which you understand that people who have built infrastructures for years are able to do something with it when it's needed. And to sort of start grappling with how things look like when the time of need arrives, doesn't work usually. If you wake up at the last minute and then you start figuring out, okay, so what are we doing now? It's less helpful. And for us, the ability, although it has nothing to do with self-care and nothing to do with our casual work, the idea that I could have picked up the phone and really got an immediate response, and people who were waiting for us in the rain, for us to put everything that we brought with us and unpack it and leave it there for a while in the middle of the operational warehouse of the city itself. It was a huge help. So I told Tali, thank you a lot of times, but most important, you'll hear about it and the amazing people that you have on the ground in Israel. Moving forward a bit for the organization, unfortunately, the first thing we encountered is that we need to do two parallel things. One is to call all the couples who had weddings scheduled and just let them know that we understand that it's not happening and that they do whatever they want. They want to postpone it, we'll postpone it. They want to get their money back, they'll get their money back. Whatever they want is going to happen. For that, by the way, we already had a drill. It was called COVID. So we pretty much knew how that looks like. And the other thing we unfortunately had to do is to make sure that the people who usually conduct weddings for us know how to do burial ceremonies. There were tons of them to create, and there was a lot of people who just got phone calls asking for people to come and help them bury their loved ones, which they never did. They didn't know how that works. So we wrapped up something and helped them prepare for that. The other thing we did was help the people, mainly from here, but also from Israel, who wanted some kind of a fiscal sponsorship assistance for people who don't have like Israeli entities or someone they know in Israel, or that we are like the people they know in Israel, and they wanted to send stuff for ready teams, or they wanted to buy food for soldiers, or whatever it is. So we did quite a few of those things that Israel usually doesn't do. We don't buy military equipment, but it was actually for that part, like the government ministry is in charge of that, did a very quick job, pretty much letting all Israeli NGOs know that pretty much everything that is war related is fine by them. And as we needed to do that, it was very nice to see that people were actually getting the help they needed. This is, I think, from December. I'm not that sure. It's the first time that our staff met after October 7th. A third of us were called to the army. You see myself, you see Itai, you see another Itai, and Ofer. Everyone that I mentioned now has been serving pretty much since October 7th. Some of us are being released now. Some of us, I think it'll take some time. And the other parts of the organization were left to actually hold the fort when this was all happening. And actually, everything that I will soon mention that the organization was doing was done by a very short-staffed number of people who just picked up everything that they should have. One of the things that we did understand as an organization, unfortunately, was that the issues that were creating problems in Israel before October 7th did come back after October 7th. Personally, for my military unit, we understood that we have to deal with mobilizing people on Shabbat, so we just need to do that. And that actually for the first 4 weeks, the government pretty much ran everything. The train was running on Shabbat, everything was running on Shabbat. And then it started creating political problems internally for the government and all stuff. It was interesting because also when it ran, they didn't really publicize it. It wasn't like you needed to like really work in getting to understand like what is happening, what is open, what is not, why aren't you telling us what should we do? And specifically on my unit, I needed to get people to the front lines. It's very simple, and it required a lot of asking for favors and making people use their family cards, etc., etc. So one of the things that we did in Israel, we just opened the form and we asked people to let us know what's happening in their service and in their unit. We got 500 respondents to answer the form. You see the numbers here. They're not great, but it is what it is. And along with 29 people who are currently in service or family members of those who are in service, we filed a petition to the Supreme Court. We need to get an answer today. As time goes by, I'm not sure it will happen today, but we'll have to wait and see. And I'm saying that because mainly those things, for a while, we sort of were in a mood in which we understood it, like things should be better now, or things should be working now. Some did, some just didn't in a very extensive capacity. And I'm talking about it mainly because it was something that we did, and I'm very proud of it, but also it's just a thing that you need to remember that those things, again, are not, when we are at war, it's not like something that we hope to get. We need it, and we need it now, and we're not in a situation to sort of wait and see how it evolves. And unfortunately, it's something that we just had to deal with and to go back to working on our advocacy efforts because it was needed. This is just a bit how it was published by Israeli press. But eventually you understood that like for quite a few people, that was making the difference between their ability to go home and see their families, or to just have no solution whatsoever. So that was a major part of our efforts. Another two things that made a lot of headlines in Israel, especially the case of the late Sagi Golan, who was killed on October 7th. He served in a special police unit. It was called, if I remember correctly, to Be'eri. He was killed, and then his partner were sort of given a very weird treatment by the officials in charge of handling families of fallen soldiers and policemen. It did go through a very fast process of legislation that was good to see. We were happy that it moved forward. It was just something that I think it's important to understand. I think we don't need to get to a war for those things to be resolved. And also to be resolved in a very narrow situation. Like, not that like same-sex couples now enjoy all the rights. We're not there. But that small portion was solved in legislation. There was another case of a young woman who was murdered in the Nova party outside of Le'im, who was buried outside of the fence because they weren't sure if she's Jewish enough or not. And all of those things. She came from a Russian-speaking background, and those things eventually sort of were a headlight for us to understand that a lot of the things that we are working on a daily basis take a different shape, but are still there after October 7th, and things that weren't solved will come back to strike the public and needs to be addressed. Another very important thing that did happen, or that we believe and think would happen after October 7th, was that people who for years were questioning the abilities of women to serve in combat units, we believe that the public, and this is also what we're saying, that the public debate is over. Okay, we don't need to debate this anymore. We understood what happened, and everyone who still had like questions or weren't sure about how this will look like at wartime, we now understand how it looked like at wartime. And I will say that while this is what we are saying to the public, that the debate is over, it's not really that. Okay, there are people on the more religious extreme right who are still saying that with all due respect, we respect the people and the women who served on October 7th and since, etc., and those who have fallen. But still, we need to understand that this is some kind of whatever. Now they're putting it into, they can't really say anymore that it's hurting the combat effort, because reality proved to be different. So now it's something about the family values, family structure, family something. And this is still something that is going to continue to be a very prominent effort, mainly because we believe that this should be over it. We should be over it on a legal level. Okay, this requires very simple legislation. It needs to pass. We need to put this behind us. There was a very strong statement by the commander of the IDF, who said that after years in which they were piloting this and piloting that and not checking and then trying to understand, said, listen, I don't need anything else. I've got all the answers that I needed. I got them in the battlefield. I know that these women did amazing work on October 7th and since October 7th. But still, it's going to be an ongoing discussion as time goes by. Other issues that did make a lot of noise in Israel are the needs to make adjustments to the state budget. Very fast after the war started, there was an understanding that the budget that was built for 2023 is not relevant anymore, that we need to have a war budget. And in this war budget, there were strong public calls for dismantling ministries that we think shouldn't have been there to begin with, but necessarily just aren't relevant for now and are costly and should not be there. And that the government, with all respect to its political stability, needs to get over it and just use the money for the causes that we really needed. Didn't happen. These are all allocations that happened after October 7th by the government itself in order to satisfy all ongoing political needs. It created a lot of public uproar, and still they move forward with it. Another thing that is important to understand is that the budget also is now being rebuilt for 2024. We also understand that we need a wartime budget. And still, while the government is doing a flat reduction in super important ministries, in the Ministry of Health, in the Ministry of Welfare, in the Ministry of Housing, in pretty much everything that there is, they're still allocating budgets in ways that we, and I think the vast majority of the public, see as hugely problematic. And this is actually an update to my presentation that came in from yesterday. I guess you saw Elon, who did an amazing work since October 7th. And yesterday, the main news cycle in Israel at 8 p.m. was that Netanyahu's wife is pushing to get him fired because he was part of the demonstrations in Kaplan in 2023. It was on his Facebook page, a secret, nothing that anyone tried to hide or that no one should look like, but that specific person, although he objected the government and all of that, came to serve when he was needed. And I think, and you probably see him more than I do, he's doing a very good job. And the fact that still we're working on the political demands of people who don't like the fact that people were demonstrating against them before October 7th is mind-boggling. And when we're looking at the future of how we believe that it's going to look, so first and foremost, Israel was supposed to have municipal elections on October. October 30th, elections were scheduled. They were postponed to January 30th, and then postponed again to February 27th. I think they won't be postponed again. And it also needs to be said that while we all understood the need to postpone them from October 30th, in a country like Israel, and I think also, by the way, in other places, postponing elections is a problematic process. With all the security needs being taken care and taken into consideration, and all of that being said, we have democratic processes that just need to happen. And the fact that it didn't happen so far is a problem. I think it will be solved for us as an organization. We had our work plan ready because it was already prepared. One of the things that we do for years now is publishing a municipal freedom index. We rank different municipalities according to how they practice religious freedom policies. Mayor, some of them like it, some of them don't. It relies on how good they perform on the index, and then they call me, and then I tell them that it's their fault or it's good for them, but that we are just giving the ranks. We don't do a lot. And we also publish it prior to the elections in February. We have a collaboration with the biggest chain of local newspapers in Israel, who are now holding service with mayoral candidates. We have a public awareness campaign, which is going through heavy changes, a lot of it being scrapped, unfortunately, and thrown away because it makes no sense after October 7th. Videos that we already prepared, like we've been working on those stuff for months. But we do understand that some things just won't fly. So we're making adjustments where possible and not making adjustments when it just doesn't make any sense. And we're working on that. Another thing to understand, and I'm saying that as someone who personally is in favor of Gantz and his party joining the government, I think it was the right move. I think that they're doing a lot of important work. I think that the fact that they have a hand on the wheel is very important. And with that being said, there are growing calls for elections. The government wasn't popular when this all started. It is much less popular now. In the recent poll that I saw, at least, the Likud which is Netanyahu's party, was cut in half from what the number of seats they have in the Knesset right now. It's going to be a long thing, and I think that is something that will be in the air in Israel for months ahead. I don't know if they'll end up scheduling elections or not. The debate is going to happen, and it's going to be a big role in our sort of nation's life for the time being. As for us as the organization, we have been focusing on what we would like to do once there are new elections and how this looks like, and sort of what are going to be the things that we are able to promote or not. It's ready. It's sitting there. We'll take the time to see when this all unfolds.
Do you take a stance on a party, or
We're not allowed. It's illegal. NGOs in Israel are not allowed to campaign for a party, to campaign against a party. Also, there aren't like bypasses for that. The elections laws in Israel are very strict. I think that's a good thing. There aren't like PACs, super PACs, like that entire world just does not exist. As an organization, we are able we are able to promote our policies. We're able to approach people who run for office and ask them where do they stand on X, on Y, or whatever. We need to approach everyone. We need to publish whatever it is that they're saying. We're not allowed to endorse or to unendorse. We're not allowed to do anything that resembles endorsement. And we're very strict about it also as an organization. We keep our hands off everything that is problematic. But I do think that as people who work in the realm of advocacy, like elections are important times. And while being very careful of everything that we are able or not able to do, we are working to mainly make sure that we are ready for when the elections are over, whenever that may be.
Uri,
Yeah.
how much time would there be between if the municipal elections happen at like the end of February before national would happen?
If you ask the people who are currently in government, they're in office for another 3 years. Theoretically and legally, they're right. Like there needs to be a process to push for national elections. The public sentiment is very, very strong on that. I think that it varies between, like, recent polls have looked something like you have about a third of the people who think that there should be elections now. You have about a third of the people, or just more than that, who say there needs to be an elections, but when there is a pause in the war, which I'm not sure what that looks like or when. And there is another, I think, less than a third that are saying no. So it's going to be a long public debate, and the process needs to happen. I do think that eventually they'll understand that, like, the public support is an important factor in winning a war. And yeah, you need to have the nation behind once you try to win such important issues. I will say that I think that there are 2 sort of public vectors that I believe will be sort of in our way when we are moving forward with these scenarios. One is that there is a true sense of unity, that this is strong, it's important. And I think and I hope that it'll stay also after the war. But the other one is a strong sentiment of we won't go back to sort of the old social contract, because there are amendments to be made. I guess that the best example is, I believe it will be the first and foremost thing that will be on the agenda is the exemption that now big part of the population enjoy, people who come from the Orthodox community mostly, not only also religious women, etc., but that's like the big chunk. And I think that when we understand that the country is in war and that we are in a very extreme security situation for a while, the notion that there is a big and growing part of the community that just isn't serving in the army at all is going to be heavily debated. And mainly it's an issue that was supposed to be on the Knesset's table in October. Of course, it didn't happen, but it won't. I don't see how that thing sort of don't make it to major news when time allows. And we are working to sort of understand how both those sentiments look together. And that's it. I think that we're trying to take a look at the future and sort of we understand that this isn't like another security event in Israel. Like this is going to take a while. It's a long process. Not like when my unit is being released, hopefully again next week, we know that we will be called again. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. A lot of the people who serve with me now want to go abroad for a few days because they understand that they don't know like how long will they be home. And mainly we understand that this is a long process, but we are in a critical point in the life of the nation. And we need to look at the future and sort of see both how we get out of this situation, but also how the future looks like. And to think about the future while we're also fighting for the present.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the chat?
Not yet, but I'll
Okay.
get one posted.
If you have any questions and you're online, please submit it through the chat. What about in the room?
And they're starting to talk about what they might do with the land in Gaza. What are we doing?
With the land in Gaza, I think at some point, like
They're saying it might be, both Israeli and Palestinian, or there hasn't been news this morning.
I'll say two things. This is very like personal capacity. Doesn't have to do with secretary. Before 2005, I served in Gaza before we left, for the disengagement, and I was actually one of the last tanks in line to leave when we were heading out. I had a plan to tell my commander that my tank is stuck and needs to go through, so I'll be the last one, but eventually I didn't do it. It was too dangerous for the moment. The situation when we were there wasn't good. I think that now there's sort of a romantic piece of parts of Israel that is looking at saying it was great when we were there. It wasn't great. We were killed a lot, and the security apparatus that it needed for the Israeli settlements who were there, again, is my personal opinion, was extremely heavy. I don't see that becoming a reality again. I do think that there are questions about sort of where will the IDF stay once you're moving forward. There are already a bit less forces in Gaza, but I do think that there is a strong understanding that the operations will continue for a lot of time. I don't see a situation in which people like going back to being Israel. I don't.
They also showed on the news some of where they were keeping the hostages, and I know that some people aren't happy with the government, but they're not doing enough to get to them. What are you hearing about? I don't know where they might be keeping them, or are they able to get to them?
I think that as regards to how people view the families of the hostages are, I think, doing whatever they can, and I really can't imagine anything else but doing what they're doing. There is a public debate on sort of is it making the price higher, et cetera, because of the internal Israeli public debate. First of all, I think that the public debate is just there. I can't imagine people sort of asking people whose families have been taken to Gaza to sort of wait and see how this evolves, or sort of say, listen, let's give it a try and see how it goes. People understand that their family members are suffering unimaginable things and want to get them back. So I don't know. I don't know, like, how people sort of, and there's like an anticipation for them to be doing something else. I don't understand that, like, personally. I think that Hamas has built an unbelievable level of infrastructure over the years. There are some situations in which there is intelligence where we think we know where hostages are. It wasn't that successful up until now, leaving aside the case of Uri Keidar, which was really at the early beginning in a military operation. I think that that's like a major part of the reason why the IDF continues to operate, because you need to try and do whatever you can to bring the hostages back. And I think that also as regards to sort of the efforts that the government is putting or not, first of all, I'm not sure I know more than you do. And I think that mainly it's a situation in which the people whose families are in Gaza, as far as they're concerned, that's the most important and the only important thing. I get it. I guess I would have acted the same way if I was them. There are people telling them that they shouldn't sort of point their fingers at the government, to the Red Cross or the UN or whatever. They're doing that also. I do think that as Israeli citizens, you have one sort of directive that is in charge of your life, and that's the Israeli government. So they're called or for the Israeli government. I get it. And it's first of all, it's one of the most tragic situations that we have been through as a nation. And also, I think that people are looking at the fact that some hostages have been killed and are dreadful to the situation. So I guess this is where it stands. I don't know, like, how operationally it might be said, but it's pretty much what everyone wants.
Either before the day after, either now or after the day after, are there things that we here can be doing to support your efforts with respect to religious equality in Israel? Other than giving you money.
Yeah, I'll say a few things. First of all, the Cure Federation is doing it consistently. I don't know if you know that the Cure Federation is the only one who's doing stuff on a multi-year basis. It's not very common. We're doing the right thing. It's like, because there's always like this tension of what are you planning for X amount of time, and then you're saying, like, okay, but I don't know. Like, and your operation is very steady about it, saying we can count on this for this amount of time. It's very, very important and very unique. I think that the efforts being done by different leadership position people within the American Jewish community are super important. I think that the conversation is not and shouldn't be and can't be just a money-driven conversation, but a shared value conversation. I think that the fact that people in Israel, and unfortunately it happened during the war, but I think that for people to understand the strength and the level of support that Israel enjoys here is unprecedented. It was very visible during the last few months. The fact that there is strong support from the American Jewish community, and I think that that's probably in those areas in which there's always like public discussion and the need to create allyship between people who are working on those issues here and there. So I think that it's very important. The fact that it's not only about the trade organizations who do their part, they also do for us. It's just that it's a broader conversation. I think that, again, a lot of these issues are issues that for years and years there has been some kind of like, you don't want to like do the dirty laundry outside. I think that like we're talking to the family, and that Jewish Federation, Jewish organizations are a major part of the Jewish people. I don't think it's a question. Still it is. And that when we are looking at Israel, one of the first sentence of the Declaration of Independence starts with Eretz Israel Kama Ama Yehudi, is the Jewish nation, Jewish people, not like the Jewish citizens of Israel, or the citizens of Israel at all. So I think that the role that American Jews, either personally or through their leadership organizations, are playing in this policy that is very crucial. It's not only like a question of like, let's fund it and see how important that is.
Do you see a role for the more liberal religious movements here in terms of advocacy with respect to religious freedom?
I think that, first of all, yes. I do think that it's very important that, like some things, sometimes I will say are lost in translation. Usually I give the example of when people are talking to us about issues around conversion, let's say. Personally, I don't remember who the first person I met in my life converted. Someone once told me when I was saying that, they told me probably someone who was volunteering on kibbutz. I have no idea. When I was growing up, I knew that people were volunteers in the kibbutz because they had an accent. So as a kid, it was something that I heard. Although, like my dad comes from Poland, but for me, he didn't have. He was like normal. He had a lot of accent. But I heard people who sounded not like my parents, not like other neighbors, so I knew that they were volunteer because I asked my parents why they talk like that. No one told me that I need to think about the fact of did they convert or not. I have no idea up until this day if they converted or not. And issues, I think, those issues which play a major part in communities here sometimes needs to be explained to Israelis. And on the other way around, we a lot of times hear from people who are coming to Israel that it's fun that you don't have public transportation on Shabbat because then it's calm. The buses don't transport. Yeah, it's fun. Don't take bus. Or when you do have a bus, when you need it. But I think that those conversations are very important because sometimes the terms are very different. And the level of knowledge is very different. Also, mainly by the way, on our side, I think that the average Jewish American knows much more about Israel than the average Israeli knows about what happens here. I grew up in a family in which we had this not very close relative, like a few steps removed, who is a conservative rabbi. So when I was growing, and they were living here up until when I was a kid. So I knew that there was a thing called a conservative rabbi and then there was a thing called a conservative Jew. If that wasn't the case, I don't see why as a kid growing up in kibbutz, that was even a thing that I would know. And I think that a lot of that, again, is our realm. The Jewish. I don't know if that's a question.
Any questions from the folks online?
Chat this time.
I realize, Uri, you can't see into the future. My question is, are you hopeful there'll be national elections in 2024?
Personally, yes. I think that we can't move forward. We will need to move forward at some point. We can't move forward in a situation in which there is so much public debate around the legitimacy parts of our leadership, and that's how democracy should operate. The situation is such that, again, there's a lot of blame for a lot of people to take. It's not like a single person or people issue. But I do think that once we're able to, we need to get to a situation in which the people can use their voice.
So I'll take it out even more crystal ball. Prior to October 7th, there were lots of conversations about what are the shared values of Israel? Do we need a constitution? Which was supposed to be created within a month after the Declaration of Independence was signed, and now, 75 years later, there still isn't one. Do you think that that renewed conversation will result in that coming to fruition, or pipe dream?
No, I think that mainly after the last year, October 7th and all that happened after the site, there is a clear understanding of a need to have some rules to the game. I also think that when all the prior mess started, I remember a conversation with a friend who was a constitutional law professor. They were starting to do these like parlor meetings. Don't listen. Forgive me for saying that you're the most boring people in the world. Like, who would want to talk to you guys like about constitutional law? It's like, it's who? Like, great that you're doing that. Fantastic, amazing. I hope it works. But I'm like, really, I don't see any way for someone to do that. And they were invited hundreds of times by different people throughout the country to have these conversations. So I think that we paid a huge price for what happened for October 7th also, but not related to October 7th. As a society, we paid a huge price. But I think that there are dividends to that. I think that the public conversation moved forward a lot. And I do think that people now understand that there needs to be some kind of, now there are conversations about a slim constitution or something that I don't know, but I do think that there is an understanding that rules of the game need to be cemented somehow. There were also a couple of Supreme Court rulings really lately regarding some of these issues. But yeah, I'm hopeful that it is, and I also think that like we got a very important lesson again prior to October 7th about the importance of creating a system of sorts, something. So yeah, I think it's not there.
Okay. Uri, I'd like to thank you for everything that you've shared and for flying over here right after being on duty. We're so pleased with the work that Israel Hofsheet does on a regular basis, but to hear about how you had to shift gears with members of the staff, not being present at all times, and and to still find that value in the work you're doing and seeing how much religious freedom and pluralism is important. I think that was a key takeaway today for me, and I think a lot of the people here. So I want to thank you for your work and everything you do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.